vulnerability for the sake of being vulnerable is not the goal. It doesn't make you better to expose all of your weaknesses and all of your problems and all of your issues if there's not some sort of end goal in sight. Is the goal just to get some level of empathy or sympathy from people? That's not a worthy goal. If you don't have the second part of the equation, which is knowing what your goal and your objective is, then I don't think it's a healthy practice at all. In fact, I actually believe that it could be detrimental. Men, we got to have a conversation about the word vulnerability. It has been overused. It has been misinterpreted, misrepresented, bastardized, and it's just becoming a problem. And I'll tell you why it's a problem. Because if you adopt the current narrative of vulnerability, all you're doing is exposing yourself to weakness, to heartache, to hardship, to being mistreated, abused, taken advantage of, and generally just feeling pathetic. Now, I know this is going to be very controversial. Every time I mention this word, it conjures up both positive and negative, a lot of vitriol, people on all ends of the spectrum with what they think this word means. And I'm going to put that to rest today. I want to tell you exactly what it means. I'm going to tell you how we can embrace, to some degree, vulnerability the way men ought to consider embracing it. And I'm just going to end the conversation here because I think it's hurting people. I really do. The Brené Browns of the world and the individuals who say just be vulnerable for vulnerability's sake, that it makes you stronger, that vulnerability is strength. That's not true. And you're only getting part of the equation. When people say vulnerability is strength or a man ought to be vulnerable, that isn't a complete sentence in the dictionary of men. Men ought to be vulnerable. That's not a complete sentence. I'm going to explain what I mean. That's half of the equation. There's another half that often gets overlooked by the overly empathetic, the soft, those who would love for you to keep your guard down, those who would love to take advantage of and exploit you. And look, I'm not a pessimist by nature. I'm actually pretty optimistic. But I think it's time that we start painting vulnerability as the way it's actually intended, and with some nuance, talk about how we can actually use the concept not for ends in and of themselves, but means to an end. So that's what I'm going to talk with you about today. Very excited to address this, and I've got some key pointers, and I've also got some resources available for you. So let's break this down. Okay, there is a way to be vulnerable, and there's a way not to be vulnerable. Vulnerability, by definition, is a representation of weakness. Period. Go look up the definition. It's a representation of weakness. Now, I know when I say that, people are going to be like, no, you got to be vulnerable. You got to be strong. You got to be this. No, vulnerability is a representation of weakness. Now, that's not wrong, because some of the strongest men throughout the history of humankind have acknowledged, recognized, and in some ways honored some of their vulnerabilities and paid it the reverence it deserved, so that, here's the second half of the equation, they could improve themselves. They could make themselves better. They could shore up those weaknesses. Vulnerability is, by definition, a weakness. It most definitely is. Now, there's a way that you can use vulnerability to become stronger, but it is not strength in and of itself. By definition, it is weakness. It means that you're not good at something. It means that there's a flaw in your thinking. It means that there's a flaw in, if we're talking about the physical realm, potentially your home. There's a vulnerability, there's a weak spot in this area, and so we need to fix it in order to keep my family safe. That's what vulnerability means. Now, it is not without warrant. It has its place. But the idea, this modern idea presented by Brené Brown and the likes in the world of just expose yourself, just be vulnerable. No, men, don't do that. Okay, do this correctly and it will lead to better results for you and the people that you care about. So let's break down the 3 points that I wanted to share with you today in how you can use vulnerability as a tool, as an asset, not a liability. Number one is you have to exercise some discernment. Everybody would tell you just mouth off, spout off about whatever's wrong, whatever your weaknesses are, whatever you're struggling with. Why? Why would I do that? Why would I just go flap my gums and blabber about all the things that are wrong with me to people who have no vested interest in my development? In fact, many of them would actually like to see my downfall. And I'm going to go expose all of the things wrong with me and all of the things that I'm doing wrong and all of the ways that I'm falling short. Not interested. Now, I will share my weaknesses, aka vulnerabilities, with the people that I trust. These are individuals who are two things. Number one, they're credible. So they actually have information that could help me. It's a credible resource. And number two, they care about me. But I'm not going to go tell everybody else in the world, including social media, all the things that are wrong with me just because. How does that help me? How does that serve me? How does that drive my goals and my missions forward? And I know I'm talking about me in this context, but replace me with you. How does it help you just to go flap your gums about all the things that are wrong with you to people who are not credible and people who don't care about you? And yet all these vulnerability gurus will tell you, just be vulnerable. It's okay. It'll all work itself out. No, not interested. These people have to care about you. They have to be aligned with what you want out of your life, and they have to be credible. And if they're not, then I'm not really going to be so willing to just expose all of my flaws and weaknesses, which is what vulnerability is. So, gentlemen, exercise some discernment. Does your wife deserve to know that you acknowledge where you fall short? 100% she does. Does she deserve to know what you think your weaknesses are? Yeah, absolutely. Do your children deserve that? Yes, I believe they do. Do your closest confidants deserve that? Yep, they do. Do your business partners deserve that? Yeah, you're in partnership with them. Do your clients deserve that? To a degree. I'm not going to give you an entire yes or no answer on that one, but yes, your clients deserve some of that. So if I have a client that comes to me and says, hey, Ryan, I'm dealing with this issue and I'm struggling in these ways. Can you help me? If I can't help them with that, because that's a weakness of mine or not an area that I focus on or something that I'm not strong with, they deserve to know the truth. And I would say, no, that isn't something I can help you with because that's not my area of expertise. So go to this individual. But you have to exercise some discernment when being quote unquote vulnerable, because there are people who will exploit those vulnerabilities and we're not going to give them ammunition to be able to do it. But your wife, yeah, she deserves to know. She already knows. She just wants to know if you do. Your kids, they already know. They just want to know if you do. Your business partners, they know. They just want to know if you do. Exercise some discernment. And if you want to get very tactical about this, make a list of people that you deal with, groups that you deal with, customers, clients, etc., personal relationships, romantic interests, and you can put them do a T chart on the left side of the chart. You can say, yes, they deserve some vulnerability. And on the right-hand side, no, they don't deserve any vulnerability from me. And those people who are not credible and who do not care about you, they don't deserve your vulnerability. In fact, I would not give that to them. Okay, number 2, know your goal. I already said this. Vulnerability for the sake of being vulnerable is not the goal. It doesn't make you better to expose all of your weaknesses and all of your problems and all of your issues if there's not some sort of end goal in sight. Now, if you go to a therapist and your therapist asks all these questions about what's going on with you and how you're struggling and how you can improve and what you're dealing with, sure, be honest, be humble, be transparent. Those are synonyms for vulnerability. I tend to like those a little better because it doesn't have the wrong connotation that often comes with this modern view of vulnerability. But yes, talk with them about it because you have a goal. The goal is to recognize Maybe I am overly emotional. Or maybe I do get agitated quickly. Or maybe this thing triggers me. Or maybe I do have this addiction I need to overcome. Or maybe I do have these bad habits that I need to address. And your therapist will help you. Again, that goes back to point number one. They care about you and they're credible. So you can expose that. You can share that. But what is the goal? Is the goal just to get some level of empathy or sympathy from people? That's not a worthy goal. Is the goal just to have content to share so, I don't know, people will feel sorry for you or something? That's not the goal. If it is, it shouldn't be. Your goal should be improvement. It ought to be self-development. It ought to be forward thinking. It ought to be progress. So if you go to a therapist, again, for an example, and your goal is to overcome your emotional outburst, let's say, then I think it's completely appropriate to share with a person who's credible and who cares about you what your weakness is, emotional outburst, so that you could obtain the goal, and the goal is to be more emotionally regulated. See, everybody misses the second half. They always say, vulnerability. Vulnerability is strength. Vulnerability, just do it. Just be vulnerable. It's good. It's a healthy practice. Why? Why is it? If you don't have the second part of the equation, which is knowing what your goal and your objective is, then I don't think it's a healthy practice at all. In fact, I actually believe that it could be detrimental and damaging to the goals and ambitions that you have and that you're trying to accomplish. So what is your goal? Is it to become more emotionally regulated? Is it to overcome some addiction or some vice? Is it to potentially connect with the person that you care about, platonically or romantically or professionally? What is your goal? If you don't have some sort of goal with quote unquote being vulnerable, then probably just keep it to yourself. But if you do have a goal, then now we can be more strategic about how we're going to express our weaknesses and how we're going to shore those up. And number 3, last point I'm going to make with you today, come to the table with some solutions. Okay, if you come to your wife habitually and you tell her how hard your day was, how big of a jerk your boss was, why you lost all your clients, why this, why that, why the vendor did this, why the traffic was bad on the way to work, and why you couldn't accomplish what you wanted to accomplish, sure, we could make the case that that's vulnerable, but how long do you think she's actually going to have some level of credibility for you? Or maybe put a different way, how quickly is some of that credibility going to be diminished with her if all you do is complain about the things that are going wrong in your life and where you don't feel like you're doing a good job? Now, I'm not here to say that you should shut yourself off completely. In fact, I think that's the antithesis of a healthy relationship, is that you isolate yourself mentally, emotionally, rhetorically. Nobody wants to be in a relationship like that. So you should be able to communicate with her what is going on with your life. But if you can't bring the second half of the equation, which is the solutions, to the table, she's going to lose respect for you. If you're meeting with a client and you tell them why you can't do it and why it's hard and why the stock market and why this and why that and why the competitor, they're not going to develop respect for you. I'd love to do this, but my boss and him and I don't get along. Nobody's going to develop respect. I watched a reel just the other day from Patrick David Bett, and he was in a debate, a roundtable type debate, and there was a gentleman who sat down with him who had put in job applications after application after application. And he'd put in hundreds of applications. He's not getting any calls back. And Patrick David Bett says, hey, what if I just hire you right now and I'll pay you a reasonable wage and then I'll give you 90 days and then we'll evaluate after that? And this guy just complained. He said, well, what's a reasonable wage? Are you talking about a reasonable wage or a living wage? Well, what is it that you do? I want to know that I'm interested. This is a guy who said he put in over 200, I believe, if I remember correctly, applications, and he still can't get a job. He can't get a job because he's looking at all the things that are wrong and he's not coming up with any solutions. He's a problem. People don't get into relationships, business, personal, or professional relationships, with problems. And if they do, they're not going to do it again. This is not a relationship I'm interested in. So if you're acting like a problem all the time, that's exhausting to individuals. Now, let me frame this in the right context. Let's say you had a bad day at work. Let's say your boss really was unnecessarily arrogant or flippant or aggressive towards you at work. And you come home and you're frustrated, rightfully so. And your wife says to you, "What's wrong? You seem bothered. You seem upset. You seem agitated." And you say, "You know what? I am." That's what you should say, by the way. You should not say, "Oh, everything's fine," because that's not true. We're going to be honest. So you say, "Yeah, I am agitated today. By the way, it has nothing to do with you, nothing between us. My boss was a real jerk today. And this is what happened at work, and this was the problem. And I'm bothered." If you do that over and over and over again, at some point she's going to be like, "Oh my gosh, this guy is always bothered. He's so weak." She might not express it that way, but I guarantee she's going to be feeling it that way. Now, let me change the conversation. She says, "Hey, you seem bothered, you seem agitated, you seem frustrated." And you say to her, because you're going to be honest, you say, "Yeah, I really am bothered today. My boss was a jerk. He was upset that the task or the project wasn't completed the way that it should have been completed. And part of the reason was we didn't have the tools that we needed." Now, here's part two. "But I recognize that even though we didn't get the tools that we needed, I also failed to request the tools that we needed. I failed to communicate effectively with my boss. And so, it was rough, but moving forward, now what I know is that when I have a project or assignment that I need to get done, I am going to make sure I communicate effectively with my boss about the tools that I need in order to accomplish the task that he has assigned me." Do you see the difference? It has the vulnerability portion, the factor, the variable in there, but it has the other part of the equation, which is solutions. Now, when I talk about this, sometimes in our Facebook group, we've got a free Facebook group, and I've got 74,000 men over there. And when I talk about this, inevitably somebody will say, "Well, if we had the solution, we wouldn't really be asking the question now, would we?" No, you probably still would, because we do need some support. We do need a sounding board. Maybe we do need a little bit of validation. Am I on the right track? And even if you don't know the answer, don't ever come to the problem or the table without a solution, a proposed solution. And you can always ask for feedback. What do you think about that? So if you don't know what to do and you tell your wife, "This is what I'm thinking I'm going to do, but I care about your opinion. So what do you think that I'm missing here? Is there something that you would propose or suggest to me?" That does two things. Number one, it says you're solution-oriented. You're not problem-oriented. And number two, it tells her, even subconsciously, that you value her input, that you do value her insight, that you do believe that what she brings to the table is something that you can't get on your own. It's a beautiful way to involve your wife with what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, while also complimenting, acknowledging, and respecting and honoring her as your wife, as your partner. Ask her, "Hey, I might not be looking at this clearly, but here's the solution I have," or "Here's A, B, and C, but maybe you have some thoughts to help me flesh that out a little bit." Do you see the difference? I hope you do. I can't... I do get frustrated. I don't want to hear men talk about vulnerability for vulnerability's sake anymore. It's not healthy. And I'm going to refer people to this podcast, and I'm going to help them see that, yes, you can be quote unquote vulnerable, but that's the first part of the equation. There's another part. And so it'd be vulnerability plus solutions equals results. Vulnerability does not equal results. Vulnerability plus solutions equals results. Make sure you infuse the solution component of that equation. Otherwise, you're just complaining. Was it Theodore Roosevelt who said offering complaints without a solution is just whining? That's what people are telling you when they're telling you to be vulnerable. Just whine. Just complain. Just gripe. Just bitch. Just moan about your life, and your life will be better. No, it won't. I think it'll actually be worse. But as a man, you have a moral imperative to recognize your deficiencies or your weaknesses, aka vulnerabilities, and then come to the table with some solutions, bringing credible, qualified people who care about you so that you can create the best path moving forward. That's it. That's how you can be vulnerable like a man. That's how you can use this concept to your advantage and the betterment of the people that you're here to serve. Now, guys, if you want more information on this, and if you want to have these types of conversations where you can tell people what your problems are with solutions and then bounce ideas off each other, be sounding boards, give each other feedback where they can do it for you, you can do it for them. The Iron Council is open right now. That's our exclusive brotherhood. Now, I'm only going to say this a couple of times because we're doing a new thing when you join the Iron Council for the next 3 weeks at this point, 3.5 weeks or so, is that when you join us in the month of September, I'm going to assign you to one of our vetted veteran coaches in the Iron Council. And the way that's going to work is that when you join, you're going to be assigned one of our coaches, and they're going to work directly with you one-on-one to get you up to speed, to get you onboarded, to get you familiar with what we're doing, to make you familiar and introduced to the people that you're going to be working with, and to eventually get you on a battle team within a very short window of 10 to 12 to 15 other men who are going to hold you accountable, who are going to be sounding boards, who are going to help you fulfill the second half of this vulnerability equation. I hope that serves you guys. I would love to see you in the Iron Council. Remember, again, for the month of September, when you join us, you're going to be synced up with an Iron Council coach. If you go to, actually, we're building this out right now. Do this. I'm going to give you my personal email address. It's ryan@orderofman.com. ryan@orderofman.com. And you send me a message, and in the subject line, type in coaching. If you type in coaching in the subject line for ryan@orderofman.com, I'll know that you listen to this podcast. I'll know that you're interested in joining the Iron Council and banding with us and having a coach work with you one-to-one. We've got about 7 coaches right now, bringing a few more on here shortly, getting them all trained up and ready to go so they can help you maximize your experience in the brotherhood, the Iron Council. Guys, we can be vulnerable. That's fine. I'll acquiesce to that. We can be vulnerable, but if you can't do it the right way, you're just complaining, and that never served anybody. I hope that helps, guys. If you have any questions, disagreements, agreements, points I missed, let me know. Hit me up on Instagram is where I'm most active. Also, very active over on Spotify. Our Spotify podcast channel is growing. I believe we have over 100,000 subscribers or followers or listeners. I don't know what terminology Spotify uses, but we do have quite a few people over there. I'd love to see you on Spotify. Just type in Order of Man and you'll pull us right up. Guys, we got a lot of work to do. We cannot be weak, and we cannot just exercise one part of this equation. We have to implement all of it. So I'll leave you there. We will be back next week. I've got a great conversation with a divorce attorney on how to overcome divorce and how we can deal with the challenges that we have in separation and divorce, how to avoid that in the first place, how to reconcile if needed. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and let's go out there and get work done. All right, guys, we'll be back next week. Until then, go out there, take action, and become the man you are meant to be.